looks like very simple, but we are going to use it with other functions as well. Then you'll understand how powerful these are. Yeah, right. Let's begin. I hope you guys have downloaded the workbook. If you have, then go to sheet 2. Let's come to sheet 1 first so that you know these are the 10 functions that we are using. Once you have seen this, go to sheet 2. Okay. Right. So there are total 10 functions: and, or, XOR, not, if, ifs, if error, if any, true, and false. Now, what are logical functions? Logical functions, they are used in spreadsheets to test whether a situation is true or false. As simple as that. So these functions, in short, allow us to introduce decision making when executing formulas and functions. Now, making decisions is a part of everyday life. You guys already know that. You guys make a lot of decisions every day. For example, now, when you step out of the house, depending on which city you live in, you will probably look at the sky. And then you will think, should I carry an umbrella? If it is going to rain, I will carry an umbrella. If it is not going to rain, I will not carry an umbrella. So there's a decision making which is going on. And if it is an elderly person, then the elderly person would probably think, is it too hot outside? Is the sun too hot? Should I carry an umbrella or not? So a lot of decision making is happening here, whether it is the age group, whether it is the weather, or anything else that you do in life. There are a lot of decision makings which take place. Similarly, in Excel, when you are, let's say, dividing a value or performing some kind of operation on a particular set of data, you would want to cover all possible scenarios. To handle those, we have logical functions. If you remember in the previous video, I spoke about 6 logical operators. So let's briefly cover them again. Okay, so let's go to sheet 2. Here I have the logical operators. This is equal to, this is not equal to, this is greater than, this is less than, this is greater than equal to, this is less than equal to. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of operators, how it works. Okay, so if I want to do an equal to operation, I will type equal to D3 equal to E3. Okay, so it says it is false because 19 is not equal to 13. Here I have used 2 cells to do the comparison. You can also use the equal logical operator to compare different types of data. You can also compare numbers. Before we do that, let me show you another example. I'll say equal to 19 not equal to 13, and it gives me true. Why? So what I'm saying is D3 not equal to E3? The answer is yes, it is not equal to D3, and hence I'm getting true. Similarly, I can say equal to 19 greater than 13, I'll get true. So these logical operators that you see here, they perform a logical comparison and they return true or false. Okay, now coming to a number. So if I type, just like I typed equal to D3 to equal to E3, you can also do that with numbers. Equal to 1 is equal to 1. If you press enter, it will give you true because 1 is equal to 1. Similarly, if you do not equal to 1, you will get false because 1 is not equal to 1 is false because 1 is equal to 1. That's how you get this. You can also compare strings. So we have seen how to compare cells. We have seen how to compare numbers. Now you can also compare strings. For example, equal to sports is equal to shooter. So I'm saying, is sports equal to shooter? I'll get false. If I type is shooter is equal to shooter, one moment, is equal to shooter, I will get true. See? So you can also do string comparisons. Remember that. Now I'll show you a fourth comparison. You can also compare Boolean values. So how do you do that? So if I type equal to true is equal to true, yes, it is true. I will explain about this true and false at the end of this session. So if I type is equal to false, I get false because true is not equal to false. Okay, very simple to understand, very simple examples. Once we go ahead into more complex formulas and functions, then you'll understand these small things play a very important role. Now, you can even compare outcome of 2 functions. Till now, we compared cells, we compared numbers, strings, Boolean values. You can also compare 2 functions. We will come to that also in a moment. If you remember in the previous video, I spoke about comparing dates. I don't know how many of you were there, but if you remember how we compared the dates, I explained the challenges that you face while comparing dates. If you've not seen that video, please see that video, because as analysts, you'll be working with a lot of dates, and Excel treats dates very differently than you think they do. Okay, now let's move ahead and do some logical operators, use some logical operators to do some complex calculations. We will start with 4 base functions. These are AND, OR, XOR, and NOT. So out of these, AND, OR, and NOT are very simple. XOR is slightly complex to understand at the beginning, but don't worry, once I explain it, it'll be pretty simple. Okay, so let's start with AND, OR, XOR, and NOT. These functions are used when you want to carry out more than one comparison in your formula. So if you look at these cells, for example, this cell, we are only doing one comparison. Is D3 is equal to E3, right? But what if I want to do 2 comparisons? Let's take an example. So I have some data here, which is about publishers and genre. Their quantity and their sales are also mentioned here. Okay, so we will use these 4 functions on this data set. Let's begin with the first function, which is AND. So let's start typing. Okay, these are the 4 functions we will cover. So I'll type equal to and start bracket, and you will notice that the Excel has prompted the arguments. For people who are new, these are called arguments. Any argument which is between square brackets is optional, which is not between square brackets is compulsory. You have to specify that. The logical one is the first condition or the logical value that you want to evaluate. The logical 2 is the second condition or logical value to evaluate, and you can keep on adding more. Okay, now let's say we want to check if B14 is equal to Nintendo. I can directly select the cell, but I'm typing it here. Okay, I also want to check if C14 is sports. So how will I do it? So I will press the comma, and then I'll give the second condition, which is C14 is equal to sports. And I close the bracket. So this is how I use the AND operator. So here is my first condition separated by a comma, and there's the second logical condition. If I press enter, what do I get? I get true. That means this and this are true. Okay, now if I change this to, let's say, if I add a couple of S's and if I press enter, I get false because this is not sports. Yeah, so let's delete that and we get true. This AND function is very simple. Yeah, where can we use it? You will see very soon when I take you to more complex formulas. Similarly, you can try OR. So when you type equal to OR, start bracket. Again, the syntax is logical 1, logical 2. And let me copy these conditions from here, or let me copy the entire formula and paste it here, and then I'm going to change the first one to OR. So what happens here in OR? Excel checks whether this condition is true or this condition is true. Even if one condition is true, the OR function will return a true. Unlike AND. In AND, both the conditions had to be true, or whatever conditions you specify, all of them have to be true. Even if one condition is false, AND will return false. That is not true for OR. Even if one condition is true, OR will return a true. So if I change this to, let's say, SID, I'll get true because B4 is equal to Nintendo, and that condition is true. Okay. Now moving on to XOR. Okay, this function, which is slightly important, this function performs a logical exclusion on Boolean expression. Okay, now this may sound a lot of words, but don't worry, when I explain, it'll be very easy. This is also called an exclusive OR function. This may, like I said, look complex. Don't worry. I've created 3 tables for you to understand. Yeah, once I explain using the 3 tables, you'll certainly say, hey, Sid, that's pretty easy. Yeah, so let's start with this. Do you see this? This is the logic. Okay, so let's do one thing. Let's start with the first table. So if I type XOR, what happens? And I'll explain this side table. When you press the bracket, again, you will notice that XOR is also giving the same arguments that were there for AND and for OR. So logical 1, logical 2 is a required, logical 1, logical 2 is like the arguments where the logical 1 is required, not the logical 2. Okay, and subsequent logical values are also optional. Now, what does this XOR actually do? It checks for the numbers of trues. Okay, now in table 1, there is only one range. So if I select, let's say, this cell, okay, I don't give a second argument. The moment I close the bracket and I press enter, it gives me true. Do you know why it gave me true? Now look at this table. This is the logic. If the count of true is odd, it will always return true. If all the cells in the range is false, then it will return false. If the count of true is even in the range, then it will return false. Here, when I say all the cells in the range, here there's only one cell, correct? So one cell has true, and that true is odd. So this condition is met, and you get true. Similarly, if I type XOR, start bracket, and I select this and I close this, I get false because all cells in this range are false, and hence you're getting a false. Now let's take it to a second table where we have 2 cells. As I progress down the table, you'll suddenly realize that it's pretty easy. Now, if I select these 2 cells, now there are how many cells? There are 2 cells, and both of them are true. So the count of true is 2, and 2 is an even number. So as per this table, if the count of true is even, then it should return false. Let's check. And we get a false. Here we have true, and here we have false. And if I select this, and if I close this, the count of true in this range is 1. 1 is odd. So it should return true, and it does. Similarly, if I copy the formula down, it returns true because, again, the count is 1. If I copy the formula down, you will notice it is false because all cells are false. Easy to understand? Yeah? Okay, now let's go ahead. Again, now let's try it on a bigger table. Once again, then I select this range and I close the bracket. So here there are 4 trues. So 4 trues is even. So if it is even, then I should get false because as per this condition, the count is even. If I copy the formula down, here I'm getting true because the count of true in this range is 3, and 3 is an odd number, so you get true. Similarly for this, all cells are false, so I get false. So if you come down to this table, which is at the bottom, this is the not function. The not function checks if one value is not equal to the other. As simple as that. The not function evaluates to true. Okay, if the expression which is inside the not, if it evaluates to true, then not will return false, which is the opposite of that. And if the expression evaluates to false, then not returns true. So basically, not always returns a reverse logical value. Okay, let's go ahead and let's test this. Is equal to not, start bracket. And this is the first argument that it is expecting. Okay, so this logical argument should be logical or a numerical value. If the given logical argument is a numerical value, then 0 is treated as logical value false. If you remember in the previous session, I mentioned the value of false is 0 and the value of true is 1. Any other numeric value is treated as the logical value true. Okay. Okay. Now, if you look here, this is 0, 1, 2, minus 5, 4, and 2000. If I select this cell, okay, and if I close this and if I press enter, I get true. Because H36 is 0. 0 is false. I just mentioned that. So opposite of false is true. Not will always return the opposite. If I copy this down till the end, you will see it is returning false for everything. And the reason why it does that is 1 is true. Okay, so if 1 is true, then the opposite of true is false. And after that, all numbers are considered as true. So the opposite of true is false. One moment. Okay. Now, this is not only true for numbers, but you can also use not to compare values. So if I type, let's say, let's do it here, equal to not, start bracket, okay, and then I say B14, Nintendo is equal to Nintendo, and I close the bracket. And if I press enter, I get false, because B14 is equal to Nintendo is true, and the opposite of true is false. So not will give me false. Yeah. So moving on to the next function. This was pretty simple. You can go ahead and try it while I'm talking. That's okay. Moving on to the next function, which is the if function. Now, this is one of the most powerful functions in Microsoft Excel. This function allows you to make logical comparisons between two values. Now, what all we learned here, and, or, XOR, not, etc., can be used with the if function. Not only that, you can also use the previous functions that I covered, whether it is sum product, sum if, etc., etc. Everything can be, nested inside an if function. To understand this function, let's go to sheet 3. Okay. Here I have several sample data for a particular month, which has 31 days. Now, this is interesting, guys. I thought of this example when I was answering a question on Stack Overflow yesterday. So I included this as a part of this session because you will understand the functions that I am covering in these sessions are very important. You'll be using them day in, day out. Okay. So let me share that screen with you for a moment. So this is the question that I came across yesterday in Stack Overflow. This guy wanted to find out the number of absents which were on a Monday. Yeah, so how will you count absents which are on Monday and ignore rest of the absents which are, let's say, midweek or on a Friday? So he was trying to use COUNTIF and weekday and he was not getting it. So finally, I shared the example on how to do it using sum product weekday. So we'll go into this function in a moment. Not only that, you can also use these functions. So that's what I told him, that you wanted to count A's which not only falls on, you wanted to count A's which only falls on Monday. But I gave him an added example where you could also count absents which fall on Fridays. So Friday and Monday can also be done. So I'll take you through this. So this is why these functions are very important. Okay, let's go back to Excel. So I've taken that example here. Right. In the first table on the left-hand side, I've got the employee names. Okay, I've changed a few things here, not exactly as that in that question. I'll come to that scenario later. And on the right side, I have their attendance mark. So from 1st to 31st, I've got dates. And in that, I have got absence mark on certain days. Let's say at the end of the month, I want to find out if the number of days present is more than 29. Okay. If the number of present days are greater than 29, then they are eligible for some kind of incentive, whatever that incentive is. If it is not greater than 29, then they are not eligible for incentives, and the cell should show not applicable or simply NA. Okay. Now in this cell, I already put a COUNTIF formula. I've already explained how to use the COUNTIF formula in the previous video. Here, what I'm doing is I'm counting the number of P in this range. So I've got this. Okay. So what I will do now is I am going to start typing my if function in a formula here. Let me move this slightly here. It's going on. Yeah, this is the criteria. Logical test, this is the syntax. The first is a logical text. It is a value or logical expression that can be evaluated as true or false. So this is the condition. If this condition is true, then I am telling Excel that execute value if true argument. This is optional, obviously between square brackets. But if this is true, then this will be executed. But if this is false, then I'm telling Excel execute value if false argument. Okay, let me enter a function. Let me move slightly here so you can see it. If I type equal to if this value is greater than 29, then type eligible. Otherwise, type NA. This is a very basic if formula. I'll make it more complex slowly. Okay, right. So this is my condition. Is AH3 greater than 29? Is this cell greater than 29? Yes, it is greater than 29. So it will show me eligible. If it is not greater than 29, it'll show me NA. Let's press enter and let's see what happens. And we get eligible. Let's copy the formula down. Okay, and you will see that I'm getting NA here. Why? Because this cell is not greater than 29. Here I used what is called a helper column. In the future, you may want to avoid a helper column. In that case, simply copy this COUNTIF formula, go to your if formula and replace AH3 with COUNTIF and press enter key and it will still work. See? So now if you look at this formula, it is if COUNTIF C3AG3P is greater than 29, eligible, else NA. Go ahead, quickly type this and check if you are getting this result. But before we do that, let me explain the legend that I've used here. A stands for unapproved leave. Okay, so in this table, I have used, let's look at this table. In this table, I've used two kinds of leaves. One is an approved leave and the other is an unapproved leave. So unapproved leave is A, where people call up at the last minute and then they tell their company, look, I'm not coming. So that's unapproved leave. And there is an approved leave when people book their leaves. So you call up your boss and say, hey, I'll not be able to come next week, book my leave. So that's an approved leave. And this is work off, which I'll use later on. Okay, so this table has these values. Here, let's say I have two conditions for the employees to be eligible. Till now, I had only one condition where the days should be greater than 29. But let's say now I want two conditions. Okay. Now, what are those two conditions? The first condition is that the employee should not have more than 2 approved leaves. So here, for example, this person has 7 approved leaves. So let's say my first condition is that the employee should not have more than 2 approved leaves. The second condition is that the employee should not have more than 1 unapproved leave, which is more than 1A. So how do we combine these two criteria and then use in an if condition? Okay, so I've used two formulas here for the helper so that you can easily understand. Later on, you can combine this with the if. Again, I've used COUNTIF. Sorry, here I'm counting for unapproved leaves, and here I'm counting for approved leaves. Okay, here I want to count. I want to check whether these guys are eligible or not based on these two conditions. Okay, so how do we do it? What we are going to do is we are going to use AND. Yeah, once I show you AND, you will understand that you can also use OR. Yeah, so to give a different condition. But since my condition here is that these two conditions be satisfied, since both the conditions is a must, I have to use AND. So let's start typing. First, let's do one thing. Before I use an if formula, I'm going to use AND. Okay, and then I will put that into if. So let's type AND start bracket. What is my condition? It says not more than 2 approved leaves. Okay, that means I'm saying that, one moment, approved leaves, right? So this is approved leaves. It is not more than 2. So I'm saying less than 3, comma, that's my one condition. Okay, you know what? This is getting slightly going out of screen. I'll do it here. Equal to and start bracket. I'm saying now approved leave has to be less than 3, comma, and then the unapproved leave should be less than 2, which is this, less than 2, close bracket. So let's understand what am I doing here. This is less than 3. So less than 3, since we are using full integers, no decimal, that's okay. So this condition will get satisfied, which is not more than 2 approved leaves. And similarly for this, it should not cross 1. If I press enter key, and if I just make this big, it gives me false. Why is this false? Because one or both the conditions are false. Let's check which one. So if you select this, visually I can see it. Otherwise, you can press F9 and you'll see that the first condition evaluated to false. Press escape, sorry. And select the second one and press F9. The second condition is true, but the AND will give you false if even one condition is false. So we have understood how to get this. Perfect. Now let's write our if function. So I'm going to cut this. Okay, I've cut the formula and let's start typing here. I'll type equal to if start bracket. Okay, and then I'm going to paste this. This is what we just calculated, correct? Comma, eligible, else, NA. That means this guy is not eligible. Let's pull this down. And we say that only these two are eligible. Why are these two eligible? Because if you look at this, the unapproved leave is 1, satisfies this condition, and the approved leave is 2, which satisfies this condition. So this is how you can use AND inside an if function. Yeah. Instead of AND, you can also create your own condition. So when you're practicing this later on after this video, you can try all and create your own condition inside it and define these part, whatever you want to show here. So once you try and do that, then you will be able to understand how this works. Now there are situations when you want to perform conditions which is based on, let's say, multiple conditions. For example, deciding an incentive based on specific sales. Okay, so how do we do that? So let's scroll down. Let's look at this range. Here I've got employees, here I've got sales. Yeah, and I've created a few sections here. So we will go through that one by one. Now the sales criteria, that what I want is, if the sale is greater than equal to 80, then give the incentive 2000. So if you noticed here, what we were doing here on top in this part is we were displaying text values. Yeah, if you want, you can also return numerical values or Boolean values. This can also be a formula or a function, whatever it is. You can nest. We'll come to that part in a moment. So if the sale of an employee is greater than 80, greater than equal to 80, then the incentive will be 2000. If the criteria is, if the sale is greater than equal to 50 but less than 80,000, that employee should get 1000 rupees. Similarly, if the sale is greater than equal to 25 and less than 50, then the incentive will be 500. This may look like a very simple example, guys, but when we are doing data analysis, the charts, visualizations, you will realize that you will have to create these kind of scenarios where you will have to put these kind of conditions so that it returns different values. Okay, so let's start. In this cell, which is I-25, let's start typing. So I'll type equal to if start bracket. Now, what is my first condition? You know what? Come to a white cell and start typing, and then we will do exactly what we did here. So first we wrote the formula here, we copied the formula, and then we nested it inside an if. So my first condition, what is my first criteria here? Greater than equal to 80. So let's type that. Equal to if C25, which is this, is greater than equal to 80. That's my first criteria. Then the incentive should be 2000. Otherwise, one moment. What should be my incentive? So for the time being, I'm just going to type a text, another condition. I'm just going to type this text and then I'm going to close the bracket. So I get 2000. Now, like I said, I could have directly written the second if inside this, but I want to explain something. That's why I'm doing this. Okay. Now, moving on to the next condition. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here. So what I want to check is if the sale is greater than equal to 50 and less than 80. So what will I use now? I will use the AND function. Okay. So let's start typing AND, start bracket, C25 is greater than equal to 50. Comma. What is my next condition? It has to be less than 80. So C25 is less than 80 and then close. This becomes my first condition. And then if this condition is met, the incentive is 1000. Press enter. So I got check another condition because 93 does not fall in this criteria. Fair enough. That's okay. I'm going to create 3 different conditions and then I will nest it. Now let's come to the third criteria. So let me copy this. It's exactly the same. Here, what I'm saying is greater than equal to 25 and less than 50. What is the incentive? 500. So I've got 3 criterias in an if formula. Now, how should I combine these? Okay, so let me now copy this and insert it here. Okay, now comes check another condition. So what I will do here is I will copy this without the equal to sign. I'll go here and I'll replace this and I'll paste it like this and I'll press enter key. Perfect. Now I'll go to the third one. I'll copy this. I'll come back here and I will replace this and I'll press enter. And now check, and we do not need to check any other condition because there were 3 conditions. So if none of this criteria satisfies, that person does not get any incentive. In other words, that person gets only 0 rupees. So put 0 and press enter and we are done. So if you pull this down, this is fine, this is fine, this is fine. Okay. Now this person, which is Anjali, got 2000 because 93 falls in the first criteria. Suraj got only 500 because it is 32 and 32 is greater than equal to 25 but less than 50. Rajesh unfortunately did not get anything because the total sale is 15, which does not fulfill in any criteria. Similarly, Aditi and Sid, they got their respective incentive. Now comes the part which I was talking about in Stack Overflow. Okay, this is the range. I will rather not blame you if you do not get it in the first go. If you took an unapproved leave on a Monday or a Friday, then your weekends were also counted as holidays. This is not true with any company, with every company, but I'm giving an example just to explain how this works. So let's say if the employee takes a leave on Monday, then he's not eligible for the incentive. How will I find if the employee is absent on a Monday? Yeah, so let's go ahead and let's use the sum product function with the weekday. Okay, so let me start first with the basic formula and then I'll come to the yellow part. Okay, so what I will do is I'll type equal to sum product, start bracket, and then I will use a double negative. So if you remember in the last video, in that sum product video, I explained double negative will coerce the true and false into ones and zeros. And then I will convert the dates, because it's a number, into weekday. Okay, one moment. And then I will select C38, which is here. Sorry, not here. From one moment, I'm not able to select the cell. It's not letting me select. One moment. Yeah, it lets me select the cell now. Or what I will do is I'll cut this and I'll paste it here. Okay, C8 to CAG38. Once that is selected, I'll close the bracket. Yeah, and then I will say it is equal to 2. So if you remember, the weekday function returns the weekday number. So Sunday is 1, Monday is 2, Tuesday is 3, and so on. Yeah. So if you are not sure how this works, do watch that weekday. The objective of sum product and weekday is not important in this video. The reason why I have included it, I want to show you how this can be used with the if function. Yeah. So if you do not understand this, it's okay. You can take your time later on to understand this. And then what I'm doing is I'm checking if this range is A. And then I'm closing the bracket. And it is returning 2. It is returning 2 because there is one unapproved leave on a Monday here and one here. Okay, so if I copy the formula down five cells. Okay, now what happened here is this has to be a constant because the header does not need to be changed. It has to be an absolute. So I get 2, 0, 3, 0, and 1. So here you have 2 A's. Here you have 0 A's on a Monday. Here you have 3 A's on a Monday, 1, 2, and 3. There is no A's on a Monday here, and there is only 1 A. Yeah? So this is how you find that. Now, if I want to find the eligibility, you can type equal to if start bracket this is greater than 0, then NA. Otherwise, eligible. And you close the bracket. This is how you use the if function. And if you pull it down, it will come here. So these two are eligible and these three are not eligible. Now, remember one thing, guys. Here, I'm using a helper range to explain how I calculated these values and how I used it in an if formula. Because you will be using a lot of sum product and other functions with the if. In real life scenario, probably you will not be allowed to use a helper function. In that case, what you can do is create a cell where you are inserting these formulas. And once you're done, copy the formula from here, go to the if and replace it like this. And it will still work. The objective of doing sum product here was to show you how to use it in an if function. Yeah, like I said, if you do not understand how sum product and weekday works, it's okay. That's not the objective of today's class. The objective is how to use any other function inside an if function. Yeah, you can also, if you want, like as I've done in the other example, you can also count for holidays on a Friday or the unapproved leaves on a Friday. So here I'm using the multiplication sign. You'll have to use AND function, yeah, with this and a plus sign to find if the leaves are on a Friday. If you want, I can give you a quick example. For example, now here, so there are two ways to do it. One is this, which gives me holidays on a Monday. Same thing if I type here and change 2 to 6, because weekday will return 6 for a Friday. So this is one way of doing it. Okay, and then you can say this plus this. That is, I can say equal to this plus this, and then I can use this formula inside if. That is one way of doing it. If you want to become better at writing formulas, then you need to understand what are the different parameters of a formula and use it in that. So what I will do here is I will cut this part. Okay, I've cut this part, and I will use a plus sign. Plus sign is for or. I mentioned that in the other video. And in one, I'll type 2, and in the other, I will type 6, and I'll press the enter key. And now you will notice the values are different. Here you'll get 2, here you'll get 3, 3, 1, and 2. Okay, why? Because now I'll take the example of Sid here. Now Sid has a leave on a Friday and a Monday, and hence you're getting 2. So you can actually copy this from here and paste it here, and it will still work. It's becoming more complex and complex. So remember, you can nest formulas one inside the other. Okay, I'm going to cover another function now. If you come back here, so I've covered all of this. This session will be slightly longer, guys. Don't worry, because this will slightly take. This one will take longer, but the others are very, very fast. We'll go through them very fast. Okay, the next function that we will cover is ifs function. Now, if you noticed here, what we were doing was here we were nesting one if inside the other. Where was that? Okay, yeah. If you notice that we had one if inside the other. Now, what Excel did was, like Microsoft did was, it introduced another function which is called ifs, that is if with an S. This function was introduced in Excel 2016. So if you have a version which is older than 2016, this function will not work. Now, this function was created as an alternative to be tested, or rather, sorry, it was created as an alternative to the nested if function. This function checks if one or more than one conditions are met or not, and then accordingly it returns the value that meets the first true condition. I'm going to take an example, and then you'll realize it's pretty simple. Okay, here, like you saw that we're using 3 nested ifs. Okay, I'm going to use if here, ifs. Okay, let me copy this part. So if I type equal to ifs and start bracket, the syntax is logical test 1. Okay, that's what the logical test 1 is. It means that the first logical test, which is a required argument, is the condition that is used by Excel to evaluate whether it is true or false. Okay, if I type this is the logical test 1. If this is true, then return this, which is 2000. If I close this bracket, it will work because there was only one condition. But like I mentioned earlier, you can add more conditions to it. So let's go here. Now let's copy the second condition, which is this, and the incentive with it. So you type comma. So if you remember, guys, the way we did sum ifs, count ifs, same logic applies here. So I pasted it here. So this is the second condition and the incentive. Okay, great. I'll press enter key so that I can copy this. I can easily type this, but I don't want to type. I just want to copy it. And then I'll come back here and then I'll put a comma sign and then my next condition and the value, and I'll press the enter key. Okay, so I've got all the 3 conditions. So the difference between this and this is that I do not have to nest ifs. I can create my first if condition, second if condition, the third if conditions without using if. The if condition, it starts calculating from the left side. And if it is true, it'll, okay, I'll explain that in a moment. Okay, now what will happen is, if I press the enter key, you will notice that this is fine, but here it is returning hash NA. Do you know why it is returning hash NA? Because there is no else part in the ifs function. So how do we handle this scenario? Because the rest of the situations are fine because the conditions were met, all the 3 conditions are met. But in the case of Rajesh, it is not met. So what we can do is, we can create one more condition which by default is true. Because if that condition is true, then the value next to it will be returned. So if I type 1 is equal to 1, it is true, right? 1 will always be true. So I'll type that, and after that I'll put 0. And I'll press the enter key, and it will work. So I'll copy that up, and I'll pull the formula down. You will notice that ifs is now working. So it checked this, it was false. It checked this, it was false. It checked this, it was false. And then it checked this was true, and hence it returned 0. I could have also handled that using if error. So that is the next function that we are going to cover. Now, if I delete this, or rather I'll do it here. Okay, I'm going to copy this formula, and I'll paste it here, and I will delete these 2. And I'll copy the formula down so that I get the error. Now, what you can do is, the if error function, it returns a custom result when a formula generates an error. When I say custom result, it means you can specify what should be the output when an error happens. So if an error is happening here, what should happen? Okay, so let's start. I will copy this. I'll cut this because this entire formula I'll be using, and I'll start typing if error start bracket. It is showing me that there are 2 arguments. First is value. This value can be a normal value, a reference, or a formula to check for an error. So the formula that I want to check is this. And the second argument is what should happen if this formula returns an error. So let's say, oh my God, there's an error, and let's close this. Okay, and if I press enter key, nothing happens here because this function does not return an error. It returns a value, so that value got returned. Now let's copy the formula down. And you will see that this cell is showing, oh my God. Now you understood when I said that you can customize this part. You can pass a value, you can pass any text. Now this was a fun exercise. Obviously, you'll never type, oh my God, in a corporate company. So what you can do is, you can type here dash, or you can type 0. Similarly here, I type 0, that means this person will not get an incentive if there is an error. So that is another way of handling this. Now, if you noticed the ifs, let me copy this again, and I'll use this part. It entered a hash NA error. So if I copy this formula down, there is a, let me delete, or rather I will move this here because in case you want to see it later. Now, this formula entered a hash NA error. The if error can handle errors, for example, hash NA, then you can sometimes get hash value error, hash ref error, hash div error. For example, if you divide a number by 0, you will get hash div error. So if error can handle all these errors, hash NA, hash num, hash name, hash null, etc., etc. But if you want to specifically handle hash NA error, the function that you will use is if NA. So if you type equal to if NA, start bracket, and if you select this, yes, it is NA. Again, you can type whatever you want. I just typed this and it returned. So if NA, it tests for hash NA error. Yeah, remember this. So either you can use, now when do you usually get hash NA error? You usually get this error when you are doing a VLOOKUP. If you have done VLOOKUP, you'll notice that if a value is not found, then you get hash NA error. So there you can use if NA. Yeah, sometimes what happens is you do not want to suppress the other errors. You want to only suppress hash NA error. In that case, you will use if NA and you will not use if error, because hash if NA will only suppress hash NA and it will not suppress any other error. That way, you'll come to know, oh, this cell has an error. Let's handle that. Okay. Now moving to the last two functions for today, if you go back here, which is true and false. Now this is interesting, guys. Okay. The true functions, it returns a logical value of true. As simple as that. The reason, and I'll tell you why am I covering this. The function is equivalent to using the Boolean value true directly in a formula. The syntax is pretty simple. If you type equal to true, you will notice that this function does not require a parameter. If you close the bracket and if you press enter, it will return true. Okay. Now either you can use true in a formula like this, or you can directly use true. Doesn't matter whether you type in small letters, proper case, uppercase, it will always be taken as true. So here we have true and a function, and we have true. Are these same? Let's check it out. So I'll type equal to true, parenthesis, equal to TRUE. Okay, and I'll press the enter key, and you'll notice that Excel treats both of them true. So now you will definitely have a question. So if both of them are same, then why do I need true function? Why do I need to type extra two brackets? I can directly type true. It is a very valid question, guys. This function, true, which is with the parenthesis, this was introduced in Excel 2007 for compatibility with other worksheet applications. This true works in Excel, but it may not work with other spreadsheet applications, and hence this was brought into play. So if you're only planning to use Excel, then continue using the true part. That's okay. But if you're planning to, let's say, distribute it with other spreadsheet applications, then I would recommend using true. Okay. Now, for example, if I have to say equal to if, or rather, let's go up and let's check this. Equal to if this value is greater than 29, then I want to return true. Else, false. I can do this if you're just using Excel, and it will return true if it is greater than 29, and it will return false if it is not greater than 29. If you're planning to distribute this to other spreadsheet, to users who are using other spreadsheet, then do not use this. Insert the function like this, and then send it. It'll still work. So remember that true and the true function and the true are the same. Similarly is the false. The false function and the false are the same. So this is why I decided to include this. As data analyst, you'll be using this a lot. So this was it in today's functions, guys.